Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for checking my presentation. My name is Tatiana Taitko, and I am a PhD candidate in second language acquisition at the University of Maryland. And today I'm excited to present my eye tracking study looking into the impact of multimodal input on L2 reading comprehension. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's begin with some background information. So multimedia learning has been beneficial for vocabulary acquisition, reading comprehension, and developing overall fluency in second language. And some of the most common aids or example of multimedia learning is illustration and audio. Illustration can provide additional contextual support, and audio can improve learners' listening comprehension while providing an oral rendition of the text. For the benefits that account for a combination of linguistic and non-linguistic input, we have a famous theory, which is called Meyer's cognitive theory of multimedia learning, stipulating that two inputs are better for comprehension and subsequent language acquisition than having one source of input. And although this theory has often been used to explain the benefits of bimodal input over unimodal input, L2 reading tasks often have a combination of three input sources: text, picture, and audio, whose joint effect hasn't been studied enough. There's some more nuanced and comprehensive theories that look into combination of verbal and nonverbal stimuli, such as Pavio's dual coding theory, Baddeley's model of working memory, and cognitive load theory by Sweller. And here, what's important is that we have two systems that are in charge and are in charge of processing different stimuli. So here we have verbal and nonverbal stimuli. And we have two different systems that process them. And then when this information is presented together, verbal and nonverbal stimuli, we have two systems that if they interact, the information is integrated better and it gets into the working memory in a way that it doesn't get overloaded, and subsequently it's being stored in the long-term memory, which is the ultimate goal of presentation of any kind of material. However, working memory has a limited capacity, which also showcases why so many instructional materials are not successful, because they often overload working memory. So this is something that we definitely have to consider as researchers and language teaching and language learning practitioners. As for the line of research that investigated and looked into processing of verbal and nonverbal information with and without audio, we have a couple of studies that looked into that. For example, Pelices Sanchez et al. 2020, who studied young beginner L2 learners, found positive effect between the time that learners spend looking at the image and their subsequent reading comprehension. In the follow-up study, Pelices Sanchez et al. 2021, who studied adult advanced L2 learners, found a negative relationship between time and that the participants spent looking at the image and the comprehension. So I envision that age and proficiency levels can be confounding factors. And with this current research, I'm attempting to extend this line of research by looking at a significantly different population and group that are adults whose proficiency level is at the emerging or beginning level. And here are the research questions that I am going to look into. RQ1 is, are there differences in L2 reading comprehension among adult beginner learners based on different multimodal conditions, such as reading only, reading plus image, and reading plus image plus audio? Research question number 2, are there differences in adult beginner LT learners' patterns of attention allocation and text to image integration with or without auditory input? And research question number 3, I am interested in looking into the relationship between the processing of image and comprehension levels in these multimodal conditions that I mentioned in RQ1. Okay. So for the hypotheses, I'm predicting that the comprehension levels would be higher in the multimodal conditions. So reading plus image plus audio, and reading plus image will be higher than reading only. And as for the comparison between RI and RIA, I'm gonna engage in the exploratory analysis. For RQ2, I'm predicting that across the board, all of the eye tracking measures would be higher in reading plus image plus audio condition compared to reading plus image condition, because the audio will allow participants to look more frequently and longer at the image. And for RQ3, I am thinking that regardless of the condition, the comprehension would be higher if participants look longer at the image. But as for the comparison, in which condition they would look longer at the image, that's the exploratory part of the analysis. All right, on to the methodology. So I recruited 66 participants, out of which 65 were included in the final data set. And they were adults, meaning that their ages ranged from 18 to 33 years old. They were all L1 English speakers and L2 beginner learners of Spanish. For the research design, the study followed the within subject counterbalance research design by PhD Sanchez et al. 2021. And for the conditions, I have a combination of reading only, reading plus image, and reading plus image plus audio. For the instructional materials, I had a combination of image, text, and audio. So the 63 images were taken from a set developed by the Arnold Lab for different experiment. For the text, I wrote myself a short mystery stories depicting the events happening in the images. It was first written in English and then translated in Spanish. And for the audio was recorded by an L1 Spanish speaker. And here you can see the examples of it. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of what the story was about, it was a mystery story following the 6 characters. So we have Senor Bruno and Senora Maria, who are in the marriage together. However, Senor Bruno is not happy in the marriage. And one day the maid who works for Senor Bruno and Senora Maria shares her story that she always wanted to become an artist. And Senor Bruno really loves art, so he wants to support the maid in her endeavors. Senora Maria notices that something is going on with Senor Bruno, and she wants to comfort him. And she also suspects that there's something going on between the maid and Senor Bruno, so she gives a lot of additional tasks to the maid. But the maid doesn't want to do a lot of extra work, so she doesn't do it. And Senora Maria splashes water at the maid's face. And then the maid's husband suspects that something also is going on, because the maid is always in her head and she only cleans the items of the house and the pictures of Senor Bruno and nothing else. And the servant goes to the black market and he buys the gun just in case. And at the end, many slides and pages later, the chauffeur and the chef come into the kitchen and they find Senor Bruno dead on the kitchen floor. However, it's not clear who ended up killing Senor Bruno, because there are lots of suspects. So this is the whole story in short. For the presentation of instructional materials, text was presented in all 3 conditions. Image was presented in reading plus image and reading plus image plus audio conditions, and audio was only presented in reading plus audio condition. And this is how it looked like. This is the reading only condition. This is reading plus image, and this is reading plus audio. Okay. For the comprehension test materials, it consisted of 90 multiple choice test items, 30 questions per condition. They gauge the literal comprehension of the events happening in the story, so those ones that I described to you. And each multiple choice question contained 3 options, one of which was the correct one, and the I don't know option to discourage participants from guessing. And the eye tracking data was collected with the iLink 1000 plus. It was a monocular recording, meaning either either right or left eye, depending on the eye dominance. It was conducted in the head stabilized mode, and the stimuli were presented on a standard computer monitor. And here are a couple of pictures of our SLA eye tracking lab at the University of Maryland. As you can see, that there is a monitor, there is an eye tracking camera situated in between the monitor and the participant, and the researcher collecting the data always sits and monitors the data collection behind the divider. Here are some more pictures of the SLA eye tracking lab. And as for the procedure, the experiment started with collecting some linguistic questionnaire and a consent form from the participants. After that, the participants were randomly assigned to one of the 6 presentation lists. The order of conditions was like counterbalanced. And for example, if I randomly was assigned to list number 3, I would start the experiment and I would read the part 1 of the story in reading plus image plus audio condition. Then I would take the test. The second part would be presented in reading only condition. Then I would take the test corresponding to this condition. And then part 3 would be in the reading plus image conditions. And then I would take the test again, just specifically to this part of the experiment. And that would be it. And what is important to mention is that the fact that they did really good, say, in part 1 does not mean that they would do good on the comprehension test in part 2 or part 3. And the duration of the experiment was from 45 to 60 minutes. So for the data scoring, I had a combination of accuracy measures and the eye tracking measures that you can see presented on the screen. For the dwell time, I would add up the duration of all the fixations within the interest area or interest region. And you can see the fixations are presented kind of in those like turquoise circles. I would also look at the integrity of saccades, and saccades are the rapid movement between the fixations. And integrity would be, in my particular experiment, the saccades that would originate in one area of interest, for example, in the text, and then they would end up in a different area of interest, in my case, picture, and vice versa. Some of them could originate it in the picture, and participant would and the saccade with the next fixation in the text area of interest. And for the statistical procedure, the data was analyzed with a number of mixed effects models. Okay, now the fun part. We are moving on to the results. So I'm going to remind you the research question and then the hypothesis and whether or not this hypothesis was supported with the data. So for RQ1, I was curious to see which of the multimodal conditions would result in the higher comprehension. And here, supporting my hypothesis, we can see that the comprehension was indeed higher in the conditions that involved pictures. So we see reading plus image condition and reading plus image plus audio condition. The comprehension was way higher than in reading only condition. And as for the time on task, I was happy to see that although the comprehension was higher in reading plus image condition as well as in reading plus image plus audio condition, however, they didn't spend way more time reading the text and looking at the image because there was no difference as for the time on task. So again, our hypotheses were supported here. Okay. Moving on to RQ2, I wanted to see whether the participant would be looking at the image longer in the reading plus image plus audio condition. And for the dwell time, indeed, I found that the looks at the image were higher in reading plus image plus audio condition, supporting our hypothesis. The same thing was observed for the number of fixations that were higher at the image region of interest in reading plus image plus audio condition, supporting our hypothesis. Average fixation duration of one fixation was also higher in reading plus image plus audio condition, supporting our hypothesis. And for the number of integrative CKs, they were also higher in reading plus image plus audio condition, meaning that participants switch between text and image and text more frequently when the audio was presented. And now for RQ3, I wanted to investigate the relationship between the looking patterns and comprehension levels or the correctness on the test. And here I was able to observe that contrary to my expectation, my prediction only was supported in reading plus image plus audio condition, meaning that the longer the participants look at the image, the higher their comprehension was. And in RI, this was not observed, meaning it doesn't matter how long participants looked at the image, the comprehension would stay the same. So to kind of sum up what I discovered here, we can say that the relationship between the dwell time on image and then the predicted probability of correctness depends on the condition. So now going back to my initial question, I wanted to see whether adult beginner L2 learners would demonstrate the same looking patterns and the same kind of processing of the image as young beginner learners or as adult advanced learners. And the answer is it depends on the condition, because only in reading plus image plus audio condition, I was able to observe positive relation between time on image and comprehension levels. And I couldn't find any relation between time on image and comprehension in reading plus image condition. Okay. And now for the discussion of what I was able to find out in this study, we can say that the image as an instance of non-linguistic input aided in reading comprehension of the text. And again, it provides yet another supporting evidence contributing to Meyer's cognitive theory of multimedia learning and Pavio's dual coding theory, suggesting that simultaneous presentation of pictorial and verbal information results in stronger referential connections. What is important that time on task did not differ between the multimodal conditions, meaning that participants spent relatively the same time reading the text in reading only, reading plus image, and reading plus image plus audio conditions, suggesting that images considerably improved reading comprehension with no time cost. And for the audio, it freed participants' eyes and enabled them to look more at the image. However, this additional attention that participants spent looking at the image did not translate directly to better performance when compared to no audio addition. Okay. And what's important that audio in reading plus image plus audio condition enable learners to switch between the image and the text more frequently, and it helped them better integrate the information from the text and pictures. And what's even more important is that it did not cause a detrimental effect due to a cognitive overload. And in reading plus image condition, people treated text and image as two separate units, which may have led to slow simultaneous activation of the verbal and nonverbal systems, and thus less dual coding and less integration. So, for example, here, if I show you those two pictures, the top or the bottom, either of those belong to, or they both belong to different multimodal conditions. And if I ask you a rhetorical question, which one belongs to reading plus image plus audio condition and which one belongs to reading plus image condition, what would you say? Let's take a quick moment. And here is the response. So in reading plus image condition, the participants would always start with the text. So they would read the text, and then at the end, they would look at the image. And in the reading plus image plus audio condition, they would switch between the image and the text as the audio would go on. All right. And if you want to learn more about this research, you can check out these articles that are presented right now on the screen. And if you want to learn more about the effect of interpretive saccades on L2 reading comprehension, you can check out this article that just came out 2 days ago. And yeah, let us let us know what you think. And then for the pedagogical implications, we can state that both images and audio helped with reading comprehension. Images for sure need to be included in L2 reading tasks, especially at the beginner levels. And it is worth investing resources in the development of high quality images corresponding to the content of the story. And as for the audio, it did not result in any detrimental effect. So it's always a good idea to add auditory support when possible. However, the teachers should encourage the learners not to be scared to look away from the text and kind of switch between the text and the image as they listen to the audio. And of course, there are some limitations in this study, one of which is that images might have helped not only with understanding the text, but also the retention of the information that they learned, which might have been the reason why the reading only condition was at such a disadvantage. Maybe the participant understood what the text was about, but they were just not able to retain the information. And for the future directions, it would be good to inquire about participants' experiences and perceptions of the modalities. It would be also good to replicate this study with the L2 learners of different proficiency levels, age groups, and L2s. And it would be a good idea to include one more condition, which is reading plus audio condition, also known as reading while listening condition, with no image to tease apart independent effects of the images and audio on L2 reading comprehension. And here are some selected references that I used in this study. And I would like to say thank you to the committee that helped me with this research, as well as the colleagues from the University of Maryland. And yeah, thank you so much for your attention. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and email me at the email address that you see on the screen. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your day.